Welcome. Today we're going to be discussing the technique begging hands, its execution, some problems that could arise during its execution, and or some tips that might help you during its execution. So the first thing that we're going to worry about with begging hands is how you start this technique. All grab techniques are generally considered techniques of opportunity. So what that generally means is you may be in a fight here with a toast and I begin to pull away and the person grabs your hands. That's typically where these techniques are going to be started. But us in a training environment, it generally doesn't work that way. What we normally do is we're standing facing each other and then we begin the technique. The thing that you don't want to do is don't want to get in the habit of handing this person your hands. Because if you hand them your hands, what you do is you get yourself in a bad position while they stay in a good position, and that's not a good thing to do. So what you want to do is get in the habit of them reaching out to you and grabbing your hands. Now notice he's in a bad position and yet I still have my arms at my side and I can use my body to aid my arms. So make sure that you don't get in the habit of handing the hands to the opponent. In this video, you may see me do this to hand my hands to him. That's just for the expedience of this technique, but we want to make sure we don't get in the habit of doing that. So as he begins to grab, the next problem is you want to get the upper hand. So how do I get the upper hand? There's a couple ways to get this upper hand. Obviously, you're going to turn your hands over, but the one thing you don't want to do is pull your hands out. Because what that does is then that allows that person to feel that you've lost contact with them, and you want to maintain contact with them so that you can then continue to take advantage of them. By losing that contact, you no longer know where that person is, and you have to worry about the two hands now that were just now in contact with you. Instead, what you want to do is you do want to get the upper hand, but now what you want to do is you want to pull them to you with frictional pull. So notice what just happened there. He could have tried to let go, but if he does, I still can use that frictional pull in order to pull him. So what I want to do is continue to pull back as I settle my weight down and drop using both gravitational marriage and frictional pull in order to pull him as I settle into my base. What I don't want to do is try and pull and step back while I don't have a base. What I want to do is step, pull, and then as I settle into my base, use that pull. This is also going to set us up for the next maneuver, which is going to be the front kick. That front kick is then going to be using what's called opposing forces. What that means is, as the frictional pull is pulling towards me, I'm then going to throw the kick away from me, and that's where you get the opposing forces from. So as I begin to settle and pull into the kick, I thrust his bottom away, and then begins him to bend over, which then closes or opens these targets in the middle of his chest, depending upon how you look at it. What I mean by that is, the further he bends over, the more they're exposed vertically, either top or bottom. The more he stands up, the more they're exposed horizontally. And in the diagonal sense, they're just exposed on a diagonal basis. So typically what's going to happen is we're going to be going in a diagonal manner. So the idea of this technique is to get him to bend over, and then stand him back up, and then take advantage of that situation. So let's continue to look at how this works. As we step back, do our frictional pull, do our kick. I then have to plant this foot back on the ground. This is what's called a gauge leg. So what that means is, the closer I get to it, the closer I am to him, and the closer I'm going to have to use weapon-wise. The further I am, the further I am away from him, the longer weapons I can then start using. So based upon the two sizes of us, I need to use this compensation in order to get the proper distance for my follow-up weapons. In this case, it's going to be a right kick. So what I want to do is when I do the pull and the kick, I generally want to put this foot where I can then execute the next maneuver in the proper angle and the proper depth so that I can execute it properly. Don't get too jammed, because then what would happen if you do get jammed, and I do this kick and I gauge here, I would have to use a knee instead of a foot so that I could then deliver it. So make sure that the gauge is proper, and then we're going to have a second gauge, which is after the second kick that's going to happen. So what happens here is, once I do the kick, and I gauge this foot, and then I do the kick here, the same occurs at this point. I need to get to the gauge. The gauge then is a very tricky thing based upon what's happening. Either I'm close enough to hit him, or I'm going to be farther from him and I won't be able to hit him. So what do I do in each of these cases? In the first case, if I'm close enough to hit him, I want to keep my elbows anchored and just do these as a double shot to the floating ribs, potentially grabbing the pecs when you're done. If I'm not, and I'm further away from this person, this is where foot maneuvers are added as needed is done. So if I do this kick and he begins to gets further away from me so I can't deliver these effectively, I want to be able to close the distance in order to hit. And again, just like settling back, I want to settle forward with a hit. I don't want to be hitting while I'm in the air. So the final thing I want to discuss is what's happening with the elbows. I don't want to be at a distance where I'm this far away, so if I can hit him, yes, I can still hit him, but what's the problem here? I no longer have anchored elbows in order to deliver this. What I want to be able to do is get at a nice close distance so I can keep my elbows anchored and potentially use gravitational opposition and backup mass in order to deliver this strike. So once I get here, if I do have to close, I can hit up and back if I need to in order to hit this person effectively. Okay, so let's do this review really quick. Make sure that we get the upper hand, but don't pull out. Step back, settle, use frictional pull to pull them towards you with the same time as you do your settle. Use opposing forces in order to do the kick to get them into the alignment you want. Make sure you gauge your foot to where you need it to be, either close or far, based upon your distance and your size to opponent ratio. Do your kick to get him to stand back up. Gauge again, depending upon his reaction to what you're doing. Either he's going to move further away from you or stay within a good distance. Either land and hit as you settle into this, or if he's further away, you need to shuffle and potentially shuffle up and in. And then if you want to add it, you can add a cross out and cover. One more time, fairly quick so that you can see it. I hope this video helps you. Thank you very much.